I'm somebody who works in ed tech circles and journalism, obviously, but I think we've done sort of a poor job of making the case for our students about why what we teach matters. And we're starting to see that with, chronic absenteeism and a willingness to cheat. Not just the how, because kids have always cheated, always. Maybe some of you have cheated. But, thinking about disincentivizing that reason for cheating. And at the same time, this isn't about policing kids or making tricks, tying ourselves in knots to find these, really strange ways to prevent kids from cheating. It's how can we work together to actually enjoy ourselves and do something meaningful?
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Life's Next Lesson Plan. I'm Rachel, and I started this podcast during my 29th and last year as a high school teacher. The goal of my work with Life's Next Lesson Plan, as well as my Live and Learn Patreon, is to create a connection where we are all teachers. We all have lessons and stories to share that can help others. I'm so fortunate to be able to extend the four walls of my previous classroom to an unlimited audience, where we can all learn from each other. And my guests are some of the most inspirational people with the best stories and lessons I know, which is why I want to share them with you. Their words are something everyone should hear. It is my hope that you are able to take away something from each episode to apply to your own life, whether that be a career search, path to a more fulfilling life, or new ideas on current topics. It is my honor today to introduce Michael Hernandez to you. I was saying to Michael, we've known each other for quite a while, so I had to look up exactly when we met. And we met in Ithaca, New York in 2013. We had both won, with a handful of people, had won a journalistic related award, and they flew us out to Ithaca, New York, where I've never experienced before an airport where they will cook you a breakfast in front of you, like a home-cooked meal. That was my first experience with that. But we got to tour Ithaca College and have a nice dinner and meet with other journalism professionals. And so that's going back to 2013, which seems like a blur. And we are taping this now at the end of January 2025. Michael lives in California, so I wanted him to just talk a little bit, because it's been in the news before we get into his background, what's been going on with the fires in LA, because I know that he is near that, and these are topics that he's talking about in his classroom. So if you don't mind, feel free to say your bio first, and then we can talk about the fires, or we can talk about the fires first, and then hear your background.
Yeah.
Up to you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me, and it's great to have that sort of flashback to however many years ago, 2013, if I do the math right. But yeah, so I'm a high school teacher in the Los Angeles area. I've been teaching now, this is my 26th year. I teach media arts, which includes broadcast journalism, film production, photography, graphic design, and thinking back, what a long journey that's been and how technology and the world has changed in that time. It's a lot of changes that have impacted education. But yeah, being in Los Angeles, just after the fires have just been sort of contained, luckily, my house and my school are far from the fires. So we weren't directly impacted by it, but we did have bad air quality for a few days. And now we're receiving a lot of students who've been displaced by the fires. And so you think over 180,000 people have been displaced, lost their homes or can not return. And so a lot of students are scattered across the city. And Los Angeles is a very large city and conglomerate of other associated nearby cities. And so, thinking about how that impacts community, not just your routine of having a longer commute, but think about in school, you have your friends, you have your routines, you have your teachers, it's comfortable, and suddenly you're jostled and you have to make new friends and new teachers and a new way of school culture, and it just kind of throws everything off. And so it's just sort of fascinating to kind of see how that has impacted culture. And The other thing too, sort of a learning moment, as teachers like to say, is like this is, just listening to the news this morning, like global scientists have determined that the fires were caused by climate change. So there's a number of factors, but the global consensus of experts is that these were caused by climate change. And so this idea that, you can't escape reality. There is no bubble. There's no place that you are safe from climate change. And I think I made a post about it, when this happened, I had sort of an emotional sort of reaction to all this. And it's like, one of the things is like any of us can be refugees at any moment. It's just a matter of luck. And so when we're thinking about the political climate that we're living in the United States of, not wanting to take immigrants from other countries, no matter what the circumstances is, like, well, someday you're going to ask for that. And will people return the favor to you? And so it really sort of highlights not only the technical things in the classroom about science and facts and doing research and how we need to rely on expertise. But what does it mean to be a good citizen? What does it mean to be a good neighbor and friend? And, all of things cross-cut and interact with each other. There's no silos. Everything is interdisciplinary. And so I know we're going to talk about this a little later, but that's kind of one of the reasons I wrote my book and published it this year was, this idea that we need to make connections that haven't been made yet. And how can we help the students process these difficult issues? They're not just, facts on a test. They're people's lives and emotions and families and their future. And they want to do something. They need to do something about it. And so, this is just another example of why what we teach matters and how we teach matters. Because, we don't teach just for the sake of taking tests. We teach to raise good citizens. That's the point of school. And it's just another example of why school matters and why good school matters.
Yeah, it really, especially having it be so close to you, and then the implication of seeing people who are directly affected, entering the classrooms, it just really re-emphasizes, like you said, the importance of looking at the big picture and how one domino affects the next domino, right? Yeah. So, Michael mentioned briefly in his bio that he is an author and he is a speaker, and he has a very long list of accomplishments. So do you want to talk a little bit about your book? And I know you're going to teach others how to write a book. You have a webinar coming up, correct?
Yeah. So the book that I published is called Storytelling with Purpose, Digital Projects to Ignite Student Curiosity. It's published by ISTE, just merged with ASCE. And it's sort of a labor of love, sort of basically everything that I teach over the last 25 years sort of culminated into one condensed form. It's basically a guide and roadmap for educators of every grade level and subject area about how to use project-based learning to energize their classrooms and solve the challenges around cheating and low student engagement and artificial intelligence. So it's the idea that instead of teaching to a test, you teach to a project, and you have students find something that they're passionate about and how to leverage their curiosity and their passion and providing a purpose for the assignments to really energize and help the students make connections between our curriculum and their lives to see why it matters and why it's so important. And, I'm somebody who works in ed tech circles and journalism, obviously, but, I think we've done sort of a poor job of making the case for our students about why what we teach matters. And we're starting to see that with, chronic absenteeism and a willingness to cheat, not just the how, because kids have always cheated, always. Maybe some of you have cheated. But, thinking about disincentivizing that reason for cheating. And at the same time, this isn't about policing kids or making tricks, tying ourselves in knots to find these, really strange ways to prevent kids from cheating. It's like, how can we work together to actually enjoy ourselves and do something meaningful? And if we're going to ask our kids to stress out and pour in their blood, sweat, and tears into the work of our classrooms, why not put it to good use? You don't have to wait until you're, got a PhD and in 30 years old or 40 years old to make a difference in the world. Even a kindergartner can make a difference. And so, in a nutshell, that's kind of what the book is about, helping folks find joy and purpose in learning and do it in a way that is rigorous and hits all the standards, and doesn't let kids get away with things. And I think, I wrestled with the title quite a bit, because people have a preconceived idea of what the word storytelling means. But I also use the term multimedia research project. And that sounds a lot more academic and serious. And that's actually what it is. It's like nonfiction stories. So things like a podcast or a digital book, which, can curate a bunch of different sources, infographics to explain your thinking, data visualization. Like, how do you, I call in the book, painting by numbers, data visualization. How do I take data from math or science and make it understandable to an audience using visuals, all the way through, explainer videos and documentaries. So it's a whole host of different kinds of ways that we can help kids relate to the content and also to express themselves. If I can just kind of go in for a little bit about the assessment piece, is like, if think about going back to your own schooling and your own memory of school, what stood out to you? What are those moments that really resonate, that stick with you as something, that a learning moment that was enjoyable, or maybe you had success at, or that kind of sparked an idea or a love for learning? And it probably wasn't a test, and it probably was not an essay, and it was definitely not a worksheet. It was probably a project, or a team project. We got to collaborate with someone, and something where you had agency and the teacher trusted you to take it and wrestle with it on your own, and sort of put your own sort of personal stamp on things. And I think we need to bring that back. How can we borrow that momentum in our own lessons? And that's what I'm trying to do with the book, and share that widely. And I actually took one of the chapters is on assessment. How do we use story projects as a form of assessment? And I turned that into an online course now. So you can kind of go in and self-paced online course around Uncheatable Assessments. So there's a lot of ways that folks can use it. And I'm really excited about it. So we're coming up on the first anniversary of the book being published next month.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yeah, I definitely have a copy on my shelf. My prerequisite journalism class is called Nonfiction and Visual Storytelling. And so when I saw your title, I was like, oh yeah. And I am like, I know him. He's going to have good stuff. So I definitely have used a lot of the projects in my nonfiction journalism class. So I will put a link to where you can find Michael's book in the show notes, and then any other links related to your course or your author kind of help series that you have coming up. I'll put links to where you can find Michael and all of those things in the show notes for you guys, because he just has a wealth of knowledge. And like I said, this is probably one of the biggest topics now in education. We just had a conversation about it at lunch today as English teachers. And it was interesting because the teacher who was speaking at lunch today said, I had 5 kids that I needed to speak to. I basically said, I know what you did. I can prove what you did. Here's what you did. If you don't want this to go any further, we're going to leave it here. And they were all like, yes, I did it. I'm sorry. And that just, that's an AP writing class. It's hard, but it's something, again, that 26, 29 years ago, we were not facing. And so to try to find creative ways to do meaningful work with kids where this doesn't become a factor is so important. So I appreciate that work so much. So getting into kind of what we talk about here at Life's Next Lesson Plan, we talk a lot about school. And do you have for us today, I know you have so many amazing experiences as an educator, but sort of a highlight or a story that stands out to you that you can share with us from your 26 years?
Oh man, there's like 1,000 stories. I don't know how to narrow it down. There's so many. I remember one time, this is a few years ago now, I was like at the gym working out, and I hear, Mr. Hernandez. And I'm like, what? I look around, and this guy comes up to me, and he's like, hey, it's me, Nick. And I'm like, you, Nick. And I remembered it took me back to the very first year I was teaching, and there was this punk kid in my class that was always, he would come in with a scowl on his face, and he would like mess with the thermostat. I have this big media arts lab, so there's like all these spaces kids can get into trouble in if they want to. And I'm like, this kid that was just, and I was like still getting my bearings as a teacher. I was struggling to have classroom management and figure out what my curriculum was and manage all the kids and equipment and stuff. And here was this kid who would always come in and cause trouble. And I don't know whatever happened to this kid, but here he is now in the gym, and he's like the manager of this gym. And he's like, hey, I guess I was a real jerk, when I was in your class. I'm really sorry about that, but I really enjoyed your class. And that was it. And it was like, wow, it was that moment that like, here are these kids that are hormonal or who knows what's happening in their lives. And they're, we all react in ways that we don't anticipate or understand because of what's happening in our lives. And it was a great reminder that in the moment, it's not something that's personal, and that the kids will grow and change and evolve. And we're just one of those steps in their life as they grow and mature and process the world. And, that was sort of a funny and sort of poignant moment for me too. But that's just a little one. But yeah, I mean, I have so many different moments of, working with kids like day to day, or big projects we did when we traveled abroad to make documentaries in places like Cuba and Vietnam and stuff. That was great. And maybe one of the most interesting is having my own daughter as my student. So I don't know if I can tell you the origin story. If you
Sure. Sure.
I got divorced when my daughter was about to start 8th grade, which, of course, if you're a girl, you probably know that's a very difficult time in life. And, if you've been divorced, you know all of the issues around kids and what they think of you and all of these emotions. And, it's a really difficult time. And so I was invited to speak at the Journalism Education Association conference in Seattle. And it was the spring conference. And so it was the beginning of our spring break. And I'm like, Maya, why don't you come with me? We'll go together, father, daughter. We'll come to the conference. You can go to some of the sessions, and then we'll have, a long vacation in Seattle and enjoy that. So she came with me to the JEA conference where I've spoken before. And she sat through a couple of my sessions, and the room was packed. Kids were leaning in about what I had to say. I don't even remember what I was talking about, something related to video journalism or something like that. And, the kids come up and say stuff, and they leave, the room clears out. Maya comes up to me and she says, Dad, that was really good. You're a really good speaker. She's like, I think I want to take your journalism class next year. And it was just, my heart just swelled. It was one of those moments, not only that she was into what I was into subject-wise, but that she finally, as a child, understood what her dad was doing. When he traveled to go speak, or when I came home with these issues that I was wrestling with at school. And so that was a really great bond to have with my daughter and have that connection. And for the next 4 years, she was in my journalism class and sort of found her passion of, and this is somebody who's not good at school. Like Maya struggled with school. Turns out later we found out she has ADHD, and we didn't know it. And so she had trouble focusing and studying and all of these things. And this was something that she could be good at, that she could express herself with. And she found success where she couldn't find it in traditional ways of doing that. And I feel like that was an aha moment for me, even though I'd been teaching for 15, 20 years at that point. But like everybody comes in with their thing, like what they're good at, what they struggle with. And school does a really good job of saying you're good or you're not good, or you're smart or you're not smart, and dividing people instead of helping them find their strengths and leverage their strengths to express themselves. And it was also great for me as an educator too, because I could see the other side of things when I was giving assignments and deadlines, what that looked like from the student perspective. Because I would see her at our house at a kitchen table doing her homework, and like, oh, you're struggling with that? I guess I wasn't clear on that, or maybe I should think about my deadlines a little bit differently, or something like that. And so that was a really great series of moments, I guess, in my education career. Yeah.
Yeah, I can 100% relate. I have a daughter who's a senior right now, and all the years going through, the college prep experience and everything. And you're like, wow, this is different when I see it at home in my own house. I see this happening. But your point about your daughter and just what we've been talking about with your book is like, not everybody is good at taking a test or writing an essay or taking notes. And that's what's so awesome about what we do, because I think any kid, again, if you give them agency and choice, they can find something that they're passionate about, and that just makes a huge difference for motivating them. And it's a different, way of learning. So it's so great, though. I know I definitely, as my daughter went through each grade of high school, I was like, okay, so maybe that wasn't as important as I thought it was, watching some of the things at home. So, and I also got divorced when she was going into 8th grade. So during a pandemic, so that I can totally relate to that as well. So you mentioned, and I'm so glad you did, because I wanted you to talk just a little bit about the traveling that you do with students making documentaries. That is so amazing.
Yeah, I teach at a school that is a pretty privileged neighborhood. It's a suburb of Los Angeles. It's not LA unified. And so it's mostly white, pretty wealthy, and people tend to stay in their bubble, both creatively and intellectually. And when people travel, they go to resorts where it's walled off and gated, and you might as well be in the United States, right? And, I was noticing with my students an inability to empathize or see other perspectives. And so I try to figure out, how can I do this? We teach journalism, but still you're kind of limited with your neighborhood and how far the kids can go. And so a friend was doing these kinds of projects at another school, and I connected with the travel agent who organized these trips. And I just decided, you know what, this is a great opportunity to get kids literally out of their bubble and to help them see and witness and experience and smell and taste another culture, how other people live in different parts of the world. And I particularly chose an agency that traveled to areas of the world where the U.S. has troubled history of foreign policy. I mean, it's pretty much every country, right? They throw a rock and you did 17 of them. But so Latin America, where we meddled in supported coups in Latin America. We went to Guatemala. We went to Cambodia. Was our first trip, and that was actually the first trip I ever left the country for. I had never had a passport before I took 16 kids to Cambodia by myself. And met the chaperones in country. We traveled to Cuba, which was incredible, and Vietnam. And it's just sort of, everybody convincing the parents to let the kids go. Everybody was worried about safety, and this is a safe place. And I'm like, dude, it's Vietnam. It's a communist country. It's safer than people are dying all the time in the United States from gun deaths. Really, are we on the same, are we paying attention here? What's going on? And it turns out we have all these preconceived ideas of what safety is, and, not to fault the parents. I mean, I would be concerned too, going to another country. It's further than the other side of town. It's not a sleepover. I think that was also part of the education, is extending out to the families that this is possible. And so what we would do is we would take the kids, we would study about the country, learn about the history, which they aren't taught in social studies, by the way, because, they start teaching history at the beginning of time, which for us is Middle Ages Europe, right?
Yeah.
And then you run out of time before you even get to the Vietnam War. So I had kids that took to Vietnam. They were juniors in high school, which is American history, and they hadn't learned about the Vietnam War because they ran out of time. Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
Right? And so I think I put it in the book that we teach history backwards. We should be starting with current events, and then what's happening right now? What am I witnessing, experiencing, thinking about? What are people talking about? And then do a deep dive. How did we get here? And then that's the reason for going back and exploring and making the connection of why we should pay attention to the past, because it affects us now. So anyway, we did these amazing trips. The kids would shoot footage, interview people. We had a translator who could speak the language. And it was just incredible. And I feel like anybody who's done a field trip knows that experiential learning is really the only way to teach. I mean, you don't really understand something until you've experienced it. And that's talking to people, sharing a meal with them, the smell, the sound, the taste of a place. You've got to walk in the space. Asia is very different than Europe, and that was huge. Going to Cuba was huge, and it was just transformative. And honestly, some of the best projects ever to come out of my class came from those trips.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah, I can imagine. Are those viewable? Is there a link that if I put that, people can see some of the work that your students did?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so we'll share that as well. Yeah, I mean, again, these are all ideal experiences, right? That you can create smaller versions of if, not everybody can take students to these places. That's what your book kind of does too, is show how you can infuse aspects of what you did there. That's so amazing. To those of you who have followed me for a while, you know that I value mental and physical wellness. Personally, I've worked with a few different coaches over the years and even been one myself. If you are looking for education and support in your own wellness journey, I would love to invite you to the wellness community I am currently in that keeps me accountable daily with my nutrition and movement. If you are a Facebook user, you can search for our free group called Team MG. This group is led by my coach, Megan Grimaud, who is a certified trainer and nutrition coach. She offers lots of education and support for your wellness journey. If you want to get to know Coach Megan more, you can follow her on Instagram at all lowercase Megan, MEGAN _Grimaud, GRIMORD, or even listen to her on episode 10 of the podcast. She has also created a discount code for my listeners. Just go to her website, www.team-mg.com, and enter code LESSONPLAN10 to get $10 off any of her premium coaching packages for the first month. Coach Megan is a busy mom like me who works full-time, so I appreciate her practicality mixed with some tough love to keep me going. Obviously, in the last few years especially, but I mean, if I just think about even since I've met you, the things that you have been doing seems like what goals are left. But I'm sure, knowing you, you have other things that you aspire to be doing, or maybe just fine-tuning things that you have done in the past. So what kinds of things are on the Michael Hernandez goal list?
Oh my God, you challenged me with a really hard question. It's funny, I've done a lot of things. I've been very fortunate to have met some really great people and have gone, joining some organizations that inspired my practice. I met some of my best friends through these work organizations. And I feel like I kind of, maybe it's just my personality, but I feel like I wander through life. I don't set up a plan and go in 5 years, I'm going to do this. And in 10 years, I'm going to do that, because, the world changes so rapidly and I don't know. I'm still actually trying to figure out what I want to do when I grow up, honestly. And maybe it's, I don't know if that's good or bad, but I kind of operate a lot on intuition. And, I know that, I got started teaching because I enjoyed it, and it's kind of in my blood because all of my family are educators. Both my parents, 2 aunts and an uncle, were teachers. But I really enjoy it. And then I started doing this, and then I was curious about something. So I tried it and I did that. And then I'm like, oh, these people are doing this. I'm going to go talk to them. And so I go, we're JEA. I went to my very first JEA conference, and I met a conference buddy at the newbies meeting, and she was an Apple Distinguished Educator and taught me about that. And so then I joined ADE and met all these folks that work at Apple, and it just led from one thing to the next. And I feel like maybe it's good to have some set of goals as far as maybe what kind of life you want to live, what kind of relationships you want to have. But for me at work, I don't know. I just feel like I'm just curious about a lot of different things. And so I let that curiosity carry me into places that I might not have expected or known exist. And the same thing with skills. I do things that seem random, hiking and backpacking or running or taking poetry workshops. I'm not a good poet, but the skills that I learned help me be a better writer in my other work. And so I feel like there's always something that you can explore and embrace that's enjoyable, fun, and not directly related to work, but does help you become who you are. I'm not trying to avoid your question.
No, I like that. That is such, for a type A person like me, who is I need to know what I'm going to be doing 10 years from now, and here's my plan to get there. It's such a good reminder that, like you said, it could all change tomorrow. And so what good is that plan anyway? Now,
Yeah.
if you know, like, here are some of the experiences I would like to have, or like you said, you meet someone unexpectedly, you couldn't have planned for that to happen anyway. So it's so good for someone like me who likes to think 10 years ahead and have a plan to hear that some of the best things happen that they're not even planned, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yeah. So no, that's actually perfect.
Yeah. And, like the pandemic happened and that threw everybody off for a few years. Nobody planned that. But if you have, a resilient, flexible mindset, then you're able to handle those kinds of things. And I feel like that's the skill and the mindset that the only skill and mindset that I need to teach my students.
Yeah, and that's
be flexible.
It's such a good point. Look at what has changed in our world since the pandemic that we couldn't have, predicted.
Artificial intelligence. Who knew like 2 years ago this would be a thing, and here we are. Somebody probably did because they pay attention to those things. But I think being flexible. But as far as what's next for me, I don't know. I'm doing some consulting work, working with schools to help them, think about authentic learning and uncheatable assessments, helping them integrate technology to use it in ways that are productive and make sense for their students and make teaching and learning enjoyable and meaningful and efficient. Is there another book on the horizon? I don't know. I have an idea for a non-education related idea. Maybe that's an essay or something else. I don't know. But and just helping folks, like you mentioned at the top of the story, like I'm going to have a workshop on how to become an author. So a lot of people are asking me, how did you write your book? And what was that like? And so I'm going to, do some workshops around that. And again, this is something like, because I had the experience writing the book, now I feel I have something I can contribute to the conversation around a topic and just going to let me go that direction. So I guess I'm still connected to education because I love learning and I'm curious about the world. And I feel like it should be fun and enjoyable. And maybe I can contribute and help people out in some way.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's perfect message that I needed to hear today. So thank you for that. Okay, so I know you have so many things to teach, but we have to boil it down to one lesson. So I'm so excited for what you have brought for the listeners today. So let's just jump right into what you're going to teach us in your lesson today.
Sure. So this is a lesson that comes from my book that I use myself all the time. In fact, I was just using it today with my photography students, introducing the photojournalism unit. And this project is called the Empathy Interview. And an empathy interview is used by scientists, social scientists, marketing experts, business people, as well as journalists and everything. And basically, it's using the inquiry mindset to do qualitative research. So this idea of you don't know what you don't know. And when we ask students, or if you're a scientist doing research, or you're starting up a business and you're trying to find market or how to market your products to people, you need to find out how they feel about it and what's on their mind. What are they worried about? What are they thinking about? What are their hopes, dreams, goals, fears? And that helps guide your research as you go forward, doing more primary source research. And it helps you make a better end product. So this is especially useful if we're doing authentic projects, whether that's a podcast like this one. We definitely talked before this conversation happened. So that's an empathy interview. Scientists need to know what aspect of a topic they're going to spend their energy on researching, and so forth. And so the empathy interview is an easy way that any grade level, any subject area can do this. So empathy interview is finding a stakeholder, somebody who has something to do with this topic or has been affected by this topic or is responsible for this topic. And you talk to them. That's it. And so you'd first of all do a little bit of background research. Who is this person? How do I know this person is a stakeholder and in what way? And then you go to them and you have sort of a semi-structured conversation asking them about their relation to this topic. Tell me stories about this. Tell me what you're thinking. Tell me why you made these decisions. What are you wondering about? Things like that. In the book, we talk about how to write good questions. As a journalism teacher, you spend a lot of time. How do we, craft good questions? And that can make all the difference when you're doing polls. People are asking you what you want to buy. Your doctor is asking you. They're going to ask the right questions to get the data out of you, And so once the kids have these conversations, which is a whole lesson in itself, how do I, talk to humans that's not texting on a screen, right? This is unusual for kids. How do I compose an email? This is the first time students have ever been asked to write an email outside of the school district, if it's an expert, or an athlete, or somebody who's on the city council in your town, an author of a book, an artist, anybody like that. So there's all these skills that are going around this. They have that interview, whether that's on Zoom or whether that's in person. It's important to do that, not just a texting or email exchange. And then they get all these responses back, and maybe they've recorded it. And we ask them to sift through all of these responses and call out things that surprise them or that they didn't know about before, or what are they wondering about now? Do you have other questions for this person, follow-up questions that you might want to ask them again? And then how that can help guide their research for the rest of the story and rest of the project. And I think this is a really great project, and that's it, right? So it's basically, how do I know where to send my research and what I should focus on? And it does several things. It helps kids get out of their head, and that we need to talk to other people because they have valuable perspectives. It builds interpersonal skills, scheduling and technical skills, and just helps them have empathy for other people and ideas and help guide their research. And because I think so much in school is about you as a lone, isolated person having to come up with the right answer, like that, like instantly. And if you don't, you're not intelligent. But that's not how the world works. And so we really want to really facilitate these primary source research skills. So that's what this is, primary source research. And that's the foundation for bigger projects. So, as a journalism teacher, that's the starting point. Like, do we even have a story? Or which direction should we take the story? We could, story of the fires, for example, in Los Angeles. We could have a million different stories about climate change or all the chemicals that were in houses that burned up. And is there a toxic issue here? What about the housing problem? Because now 200,000 people need housing. We already had a housing crisis, and so it can go in a bunch of different directions, but the kids don't know because they don't have that experience. And so talking to people unlocks those possibilities. So it's really great. And so even like kindergartners can ask questions. They're the most curious of all, right? They haven't been, taught that they shouldn't ask questions. And so, again, it helps facilitate and encourage this idea of inquiry is important and the foundation of how we make good decisions in our lives. So anyway, that's my project. That's my assignment.
Yeah, I love that. Just what you were saying about this law. Well, first of all, them emailing a professional is such an important life skill. And to capitalize letters when you're when you're emailing someone, it's not a text, right? And the idea of this, someone that they don't know, and so how you conduct yourself, and again, not just hiding behind a screen and learning about someone's story and bringing that to life. Yeah, that's so awesome. Have you when you were speaking, it reminded me of one of my favorite books. Have you read the book A Curious Mind? It's actually co-written by Brian Grazer, who's a film producer and a journalist, who I think wrote it for him, Charles Fishman. But it's this idea of Brian Grazer as a film producer. He had a list of names of people that he wanted to have what he calls a curiosity conversation with. And he would either call them into his office in California, or he would, do a Zoom or a phone call. And I mean, we're talking about Michael Jackson, Steve Jobs, Oprah, but a lot of his movies, like A Beautiful Mind and Apollo 13, came from ideas that were filtered through these curiosity conversations. Have you heard of that book?
Yeah, I have.
Okay.
I haven't read it, but I know.
Okay.
Yeah.
I actually did my last solo episode on it, and the episode was about inquiry and some training that I'd had as a teacher through the College Board on inquiry-based learning. So I'm going to send you a copy of that book as a thank you for being on here today, because
Wow.
it would be great for students too, just to talk about like what you were even saying before, look what came out of this conversation that I could have never predicted because I hadn't had the conversation and I hadn't heard this person's story. And as a result, I just got an idea for a movie, right?
Right.
So cool. So before we let you leave today, do you have any kind of action steps that the listeners could take if they want to maybe dabble more in authentic assessment or, not demonizing AI or phones? Because I know you're really good at making optimistic statements about that.
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other series of podcasts, episodes. But yeah, I mean, I feel like, there's some research that keeps coming out around the moral panic around cell phones and social media, and it's baseless. The research is really flimsy, and there's no support for that. But thinking about the world around us, and instead of looking for easy answers to solve our issues where we don't have to put any work or effort into it or any investment of time and money, it's easy for us to want to just find scapegoats. And that's been historically, in education and outside of education, the case, because people are just overwhelmed. We have a lot on our plates, and it's hard to have to ask difficult questions and put in the effort to do it right. And so, we've had this conversation on ed tech since Google came out and kids can Google and find answers on the internet. It's nothing new. Calculators came out, and math teachers were freaking out that kids would not learn math because there was a calculator. Well, now calculator formulas are built into the textbook, and you can use it when you take the SAT. What happened? Turns out we learned how to use the tool productively to accelerate the learning process and not, just demonize it, And I think the mindset behind all of this in the book too is this sort of myth that we have around education that learning has to be painful and unenjoyable. And I think that's wrong. Just because something is joyful and has purpose, it doesn't mean it lacks academic rigor. And you and I know as journalism teachers, the hardest class you could take is journalism, not physics and not AP chemistry. Journalism is the hardest. But it's also the most rewarding and joyful because there's a point to it and you can help other people. And so I think all of us need to kind of move past this mindset. And I had it too when I started for the first several years as a teacher, that in order to be serious as an educator or as a student, you have to grit. You got to grind. You got to do something that's painful just cause. And I'm not saying by any means that we should make excuses for kids. And I think we have another conversation around that. We don't want to make things easy, but think about when you play a sport at a high level or learn to play an instrument, for example. It takes a lot of work, a lot of practice, literal blood, sweat, and tears, right? You're getting calluses on your fingers from the fretboard, and you're sitting at that keyboard or that place for a long time. You're in the gym lifting weights and doing conditioning. Why? Because you love it. It brings you joy and satisfaction. And that's what the book is about. And that's how we can solve the challenge of low student engagement and chronic absenteeism is, can we, yes, still expect kids to have rigorous experiences and hold them accountable, but at the same time create experiences that are joyful and have purpose? The answer is yes, but we just got to figure out how to do that. And that's what the book is about.
Yeah, that's so awesome. Well, I mean, like you said, we could have 18 different conversations stemming from some of the topics that you mentioned today. And I just so appreciate your time. I know how busy you are. And I just know that this message, all the messages that you shared today are so important to educators and just to society in general. So I want to thank you again for taking the time to join us today.
Wow, thanks, Rachel. I really appreciate it. It was fun.
I'm so glad I could introduce you to Michael today and his innovative and open-minded perspectives. He definitely stays on the cutting edge in education, and I admire his ability to tap into authentic and meaningful experiences for students. I just don't know when he sleeps. Please check out all his amazing work and opportunities for your own learning in the show notes. Until next time, please be sure to follow us at Life's Next Lesson Plan on Instagram, Facebook, and YouTube, as well as on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. If you know someone you think might be a great guest for the pod, or you have a topic you'd like to know more about, you can share your ideas with us on our website at lifesnextlessonplan.com. While you're there, be sure to peruse all of the free resources from past episodes. We'll see you next time.